Alright guys. Alright guys, what's going on? You already know what's going on. It's your boy Andy. So I know that you guys are wondering a lot about, you know, doing the SATs and stuff like that. So I just want to go through like some quick things that I would recommend. First off, I want to say to all you guys out there, you have to understand that like this is how the SAT works. Basically, you have to I'm just gonna talk about just like preliminary things that you can do. For one, don't stress. I know a lot of you guys out there are stressed out, trying to figure out, oh my god, like how am I gonna take this test? It's 4 hours. Da, da, da. I'm not good enough. You have to understand that the SAT is a standardized test, so that means it's made for everyone. So that means that anyone who's graduated high school should be able to take the test. It's not like in your regular class. Let's say if I'm taking a chemistry class in my high school, the chemistry might be different from someone else taking a chemistry in their high school, you know. But with the SAT, it's a nationwide, so that means they don't know what's going on in everyone's class. So it's standardized, meaning that like it's the base amount of information that you would need to know. Okay. Another thing that is that don't worry if you have a low score. If you have a low score, all that means is that it's going to be a lot easier for you to improve than for someone who already has I don't know, 1550 or 1500, you know. Um, so one thing you have to know. So here's just I'm just gonna talk about a couple of things that you have to know about the SAT. Um, so let's just talk about like going into the test at first, right? When the day before your test, let's say if you don't have much time to study or anything, the day before the test, actually like the day of, you want to make sure that you eat regularly. Try to eat a healthy meal. Nothing that's gonna upset your stomach. You know what is good for your body and what's not. Like for example, for me, let's say that afternoon, I might eat a light lunch, light dinner. Maybe not too light of a lunch, because then I might be tempted to eat a huge dinner. But I'll try to do my best to eat a light dinner, and then maybe before 8, because I want the food to digest, and then when I wake up, I can eat like a small breakfast, say fruit, and then I'll bring a bunch of food with me. So I'll bring like bagel or bars, like granola bars. I'll definitely bring water, maybe a small Gatorade or something of that nature. I might bring some caffeine, like maybe some espresso shots, um, so that way you don't want to eat a large dinner, because when you wake up, your stomach's going to be hurting. You might wake up later because the food's going to help you sleep. If you eat a light dinner, you're going to wake up a little bit hungry, which is good, which means that you can get some fruit. And then by the time, because it'll be early though, so you don't want to eat too much for breakfast. Otherwise, your stomach's going to hurt during the test, which you don't want. So you want to eat a light breakfast, a light dinner the night before, a light breakfast, and then when you go into the test, you can have food with you. Make sure you get some money so you can go to the vending machine. In terms of sleep, I know a lot of you guys, high school students, college students, we don't really like sleep much. Um, so right now I'm filming this at 12:01, which is pretty funny. But you want to make sure you get as much sleep as you can. So try to sleep around maybe 9 p.m. At least be in your bed by 9, so that way, worst case, you're asleep at 10. Then that way you wake up 8 a.m., 7 a.m. Then you feel rested. Sleep is one of the most important things. When I tutor kids, one of the there's a huge difference in terms of how receptive they are, how much they learn, and how much they remember, just based off of them sleeping. Like they might be saying they might not understand something that they understood the day before, just because they're tired. You know, so it's a mind test. This is really a mental test. So you want to make sure you get as much sleep as you can. Okay. So let's just talk about like the different sections and stuff, right? Another thing I want to say, you want to make sure you have a watch with you, because when you're taking the test, you're not going to be able to. It's a timed test, right? And like every second counts. So not to like stress you guys out or anything like that, but every like the seconds count, because the test isn't that long, and there's a bunch of questions, which means that it's not like and time is very relative. Like if you're taking if you're like an hour, let's say an hour when you're not doing anything, when you have the whole day to yourself, is different than an hour when you only have an hour to get to school. That hour is going to be like every minute's going to count because let's say you spend an extra minute at home, you just missed that bus, maybe you missed the next bus you're supposed to transfer to. Now you're 30 minutes late instead of just being 5 minutes late. Even though you only spent an extra 1 minute. Um, so time is counts. Make sure you get a watch, okay? If you can, have that watch be like a digital watch that's telling you the exact time. Because if you have the regular old-fashioned watch, the you might think it's 12. It's actually 12:03 or it's 12:02. Okay, and the minutes do count. You don't want to be doing your test and them just be like, all right, 15 minutes left, 5 minutes left, and sometimes they don't actually. They'll tell you like they'll give you more warnings, but sometimes they won't give you enough warnings, and that's happened to me during the test. Um, so let's just go over a really quick rundown. Oh, and again, if you would like any sort of like private tutoring, I do sessions over Skype, over the phone. You know, you can just feel free to email me. The link is down below for my email. Um, Very inexpensive. Um, so if you have any sort of you know so that way you can get like a one-on-one person, which I think is really helpful. Um, so we can go over just some really quick tips for the reading test. So this channel is basically going to you know be helping you out in terms of just the SAT, ACT. So this is just some really quick rundown tips. In my later videos, I'm gonna start doing more stuff on the like more specific stuff on the SAT, but we can just go through some real quick ones, okay? So for the reading test, some tips I would say is you got to start reading more, okay? Um, let's say if you have a good amount of time before the test, just start reading. Like if you can start reading maybe Harry Potter, just stuff that you like. You got to ease yourself into it, okay? Because a lot of times in our generation we don't really read that much, especially and if we're reading, it's gonna be on the computer. We're not when we do read, we're not reading like stuff that really makes you think, if that makes sense. Like we're not. We might be reading an article that's just like bubblegum, whatever, like nothing serious. We're not gonna have to. We're not really reading something that would have to make us like think, okay, what is this saying? Like critical thinking, analyzing. So try to read kind of more complicated books. I think Harry Potter's a pretty good way to start. Um, and then, so like for example, you want to, whenever for every sentence that you're reading, you want to don't skip sentences. Okay. Sometimes you might be reading a sentence, but you're still skipping. If that makes sense, like you're not understanding the sentence. What you want to make sure that you do is relate every sentence to the previous sentence, okay? I always tell my students to think about it in your head, like pretend you're watching a movie because humans are visual people, especially young people. So pretend you're watching a movie, right? So when you're, so like for example, I'm reading this right now. He came on a winter's eve. He pounded on the door while cold rain beat on the shuttered veranda. So then I'm thinking, okay, this guy's, it's cold. He's pounding on the door like bam, 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 bam. So I'm thinking of all this stuff in my head. So that way, when I have to go back and think about what the question is, I already have the visual in my head. So it makes it a lot easier when I go back to read. Um, if I want to go back and analyze what's going on. Another thing. Um, so yeah, just don't skip any sentences. For every sentence, try to summarize it in your own words. So that means if I'm reading a sentence, I have to think, okay, what's going on in this specific sentence? Okay. If especially if I don't understand, I try to summarize based off of the words I already know. Another thing, if there's a word I don't know, what I do is I mentally cross out the word in my head, reread the sentence, and instead of that word, I'll just use a blank, and then I'll think, okay, what would I put in that blank? That's normally going to be the closest word to that word. Okay. Um, Another thing, I try to read the passage pretty fast, but not super fast, but not super slow either. Because if you don't understand it, reading it slow, like super slow, is not going to help you that much. Maybe reading it a little bit slower, but not to the point that you're wasting time on the test because it is timed, and you still have to use time to do the other questions, right? So for number one, which choice best describes what happens in the passage, right? You want to make sure. This is what I do, especially for reading. I'll block out the question, right? And then, I'll block out the options. And then I'll look at the question, think about what the question is. So I haven't even looked at the options yet. Do not look at the options first. Okay, this is how I do it. Don't look at the options first. Think about what the answer is based off of what you've read. Say it in your mind, then look at the options. Okay. Once you look at the options, if you don't see this sore thumb sticking out, cross out the ones you know are absolutely wrong. Okay. Then maybe you only have two left. They're always gonna put at least one BS, maybe two BS, or one BS and one like, that doesn't sound right. Then two of them, one is going to be partially or like half true, the other one's going to be 100% true. So the one you pick, you have to ask yourself, is this one 100% accurate based off of what I've seen? Not kind of. It has to be 100%. If it's kind of, then you probably didn't get the answer right. Okay. For the reading, some of the questions might say, as used in line 1 and line 65, this word, like for example, directly most nearly means blank. Another same thing. I won't look at the options. I'll go back, check. Um, I'll go back to line. Anytime they mention a line, I'll always go back and check to see what that sentence is, and then I'll try to think about the context, which is why the visualization helps. But then I'll go back to the lines, and then I'll think, same thing, cross out the word, and then think, what word would I use instead? Then I go look at the options. I literally will block the options with my hand. Okay. Um, so yeah, that's just a little bit of stuff about the SAT reading. Another thing is that you gotta get used to reading because the mind is almost like a muscle as well. Like your mind, you gotta always be training your mind, right? This is very much a mental test. If you're not someone who reads a lot, your energy is gonna be draining because no one wants to be there. So you reading it and you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on. All right, part two for the writing a language test. Okay, the best way you can study for this is just one of the best ways you can study for this is reading. I know I said that the first time, but for the first section, but here with reading, you have to understand grammar for the second part, writing a language test. You have to understand grammar, which means you have to reading helps a lot with grammar because I always tell people like if English is your first language, right? Or whatever your first language is, no one has to tell you what does apple mean. Like if English is my first language, which it is, no one has to tell me. No one, I don't remember someone saying orange is this orange fruit or like apple is this red fruit, computer is this, like, no, it's because you constantly kept sawing it, so now it's draining your subconscious from a young age. So the same thing with grammar, it's mostly just something that sounds right, sounds wrong. They don't tell us I am, you are, unless you're learning a language. But in your first whatever, you're not doing that. So what you want to do is keep constantly reading, and then even if you don't have time to read a lot, go through, um, look at what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. In this one, especially if you have to whisper it out loud, read it in your head out loud as much as you can because when you whisper it, it's gonna be easier for you to catch those errors or like see what would be the right answer because it's mostly just grammar. Which means if you're whispering it, you're at least telling yourself, wait, that doesn't sound right. But if it's harder if you're thinking about it in your head and you're like, oh, that might, um, but make sure that you're always, one of the biggest things is subject verb agreement. A lot of times they'll use a singular verb, plural subject, right? Like they is or something like that. So you have to make sure you're actually reading. Same thing, look at the context as well. Context matters not as much here, and because it's mostly grammar, but it does matter a little bit. Okay. Now for the SAT math section. For the SAT math section, okay. Um, One of the biggest things you have to do is a lot of these are word problems, which means you have to look at the word problems. If it says, um, each, that's always going to be number X, right? Um, Things like that. You just have to like a lot. The only thing with the math is that it's not as the advice is not as blanket as the first two sections because with math, every different question is a different um, it's a different like concept somewhat for the most part. But the best way to study for math is just constantly be doing the math questions. Um, if you don't understand a question, circle that, keep going over it until it sticks in your mind. Because with the SAT, it's the same SAT that I took is basically the same one that the next year students are going to take because it's a standardized test. So that all that means is that you just have to make sure that you memorize that question because that question is 99% is going to appear on the test that you take, which means they'll just change the numbers. That's basically all I do. So don't stress out. Just memorize those questions. Memorize the numbers that happen. So that way, when you memorize the numbers, when you memorize the exact question, you will remember like, oh, how I did this before. Um, that's especially for the no calculator. For the ones with the calculators, um, try to use the same calculator all the time. Okay, and if you can get a TI-84 or a scientific calculator, that's one that's easily seeable. Don't get like those really cheap ones that don't show all the numbers at once. You want to get ones where you can like do a complete like 3 times 5 squared plus 4x plus 25 or something like that. Um, so I'm just scrolling down. I see some probability. Probability is always going to be part over a whole. We're definitely going to get into depth in the SAT math stuff. Um, you want to make sure that you're constantly studying for math. And another thing for the at the end with the calculator statements, right? For the ones that don't have where you have to fill in, people think that's hard. That's actually those are actually the easiest ones. You have to understand, put yourself in the mind of the person creating the test. They know that the if they're giving you something that you cannot use multiple choice, that's gonna make it an easy answer. They're gonna make the answer easier because you don't have as much of a safety net. If they're giving you multiple choice, the questions are gonna be harder. If that makes sense, right? So yeah, we're gonna definitely get into depth on each section. So make sure you comment down below. Let me know what your thoughts are. Like the video so that other people can see it. Subscribe so that you can see the next videos that are totally free coming out. And then if you want to do a one-on-one private coaching and private tutoring in terms of SAT, ACT, or you just have homework that you don't want to do, or if you need help with homework, help with tests that are not standardized tests, or if you need college advice, go into the description below. That's my email. Just email me. Okay, I have the very low rates for private tutoring and private coaching. So just keep studying, and I will see you guys in the next video.